Hi, welcome to the fourth in my series of chats on how to get no feedback from Elise. In my first few sessions, I talked about the theme of your musical and the lead character of your musical and the plot of your musical. And for the next handful of these sessions, I want to talk about some of the larger structural elements that you could apply to your plot if you choose. Things like narrative point of view, whether you have a one act or a two act structure, framing devices, linear and nonlinear storytelling, that sort of thing. Normally, when we go to see a musical or a play, the traditional format is we are the omniscient God character who is simply watching the story unfold in front of us in a linear fashion. But there are lots of other ways that you could approach it. I'm going to be talking in this particular chat, about narrative point of view. So obviously the simplest way to describe that is you could have a narrator. This narrator could take different forms, though. The narrator could be someone who is not a character in your piece, but is simply there to lead the audience through the show. The narrator could be your lead character. The narrator could be, the lead character's best friend, or someone they know, or someone who has some reason to lead you through the story of the main character from their point of view. Or you could have multiple narrators. At some point, maybe everyone in your story narrates. Lots of different ways to do it. I'm not here to tell you which way is right or wrong. You could do it any way you want, but I do want to give you a sort of a list of things to be thinking about as you're making that kind of choice, to see what the pros and cons are in order to make sure you're making the right choice to make your story come across the way that you want it to. So those four elements that I think you really need to consider are establish your device early, use it consistently, break the rules with purpose, and have a larger story reason for your choice. So let me talk about each of those just briefly. When I say establish early, whatever narrative point of view you're going to have, make sure you establish it right near the top of the show so that we know what our expectations are. Simplest way is, if you're going to have a narrator who leads us through the story, the show starts with the narrator saying, "Hello, everybody, here's the story," and they just lead you through the story. And you establish that right at the beginning. And if, for instance, you're going to have multiple narrators in particular, I think you need to establish that fairly quickly so that we don't stick with one narrator for a long time and then suddenly switch to a second narrator partway through the act, or not until Act 2. I think that throws us off a little. We want to know what kind of a world we're in. We want to know what to expect and who's telling us this story. So establish those rules fairly early on in the piece. Then I believe that you can choose whichever way you want to do it, but you want to then employ it consistently. That means making sure that once you've made the choice that it isn't the lead character narrating, you don't want to just change that partway through. Or if everybody's doing it, then everybody's doing it. Whatever it is, stick to it consistently. Now, that being said, you might say, no, well, I want to have a different character narrate all the way through the show, and then suddenly I want to have the lead character turn to the audience and narrate right near the end, and I want that shock value. Yes, when you break your own rules, it's very powerful, and that's all I want you to understand, is that you can certainly break the rules of your own universe that you've established, but you need to understand the power that has over your audience. Once they have a certain expectation and they understand the rules of your universe, if you change the rules of your universe, that's going to have an effect, a powerful effect. So I'm not saying don't do it, I'm saying do it with purpose. Don't just do it because, oh, it's easier in this scene to have someone else narrate, or don't do it out of sloppiness or laziness, without having thought about what the effect will be. And therefore, of course, bear in mind that you probably don't want to do it really early on, because if you really want that effect, then you need the rules to establish and be really clear and consistent for a long enough period of time that the powerful break of that rule that you're going for will have some effect. And then I think you also need to have some kind of a larger purpose. If you are going to have a narrator, whomever they are, there needs to be a story reason for it. If it's the lead character telling us his or her story, why? Why does your lead character feel the need to break the fourth wall and talk to me in the audience directly? Make sure that there's a reason for that, and it isn't just happening because you just think it would be fun. I think you need to have a stronger story reason why the story couldn't be told without the narrator doing that. And if it's particularly if it's an outside narrator who's not a character in your show, I think there needs to be a very strong reason. Is it a cautionary tale? Is the character is this the best friend of the lead character who's explaining the events that led up to the death of that character, and they want to tell that story? I think there needs to be a reason, because otherwise you run the risk that your narrative device is simply a lazy book writer's tool for delivering exposition. It's the toughest thing anybody can do, is to deliver exposition, the backstory, or all the details that we need to know in order to make the story clear. It's hard work. And it's easier to have someone just stand there and say, well, 10 years ago he was a tennis player and he broke his arm, and that's why now, he doesn't like to play tennis anymore. It's really easier to have a narrator just come in and tell me that. And I get that. I get how much easier that can be, but make sure that you're not having your show narrated simply because you feel the need to give yourself some ease of exposition. I think there needs to be a stronger reason than that, a dramatic reason, a story reason, as opposed to simply it's easier for the book writer. So as I said before, you can have no narrative point of view. You can simply tell the story, have the story unfold, and we are the omniscient God who is watching the story. You can have a single narrator, multiple narrators, but I would strongly recommend that you make sure you establish your premise early, consistently use it, only break your own rules when you know it's going to have a powerful effect that you have chosen purposefully, and think about a larger reason for why you think your story needs to be told with narration that is integral to the story. So consider all of those things when you're considering the narrative point of view. And next time we chat, we'll go on to talk about framing devices.